we gamified our engagement allowed us to really open that door to these conversations that, and everyone is always asking, like, those are good ideas. And, we're Epicenter. We're known in the community. We're not super famous, but the people that know us know that they can trust us for getting them the information they need. And we had the most engagement always in our settings because of not only the conversations we were having with them, but the way that we were opening that door for them to come and talk to us.
That was Carolina Valencia, Epicenter's Director of Partnerships and Communications. And I'm Esmitra Khalida, publisher and co-founder of Epicenter NYC. We connect our communities to news, information, and each other. As our longtime readers and listeners know, Epicenter NYC has always been about showing up for our communities. Today, we're turning the mic inward to introduce you to the team behind that work and share what community journalism looks like from the inside. We're at a critical inflection point, not just for Epicenter, but for New York City and the country, as we navigate questions around trust, community, the role of local media, and our funding. That's why we're pulling back the curtain to show how our work really happens and how it's shaped every day by listening to the people we serve. We'll also take a moment to say goodbye to someone who's been at the heart of this work from the very beginning, Adriana Proaño. Before we jump in, I'm also excited to share a big announcement. We're relaunching this podcast under a new name, Making It Here. Each episode will spotlight the journey of a New Yorker who's building something meaningful, a business, an artistic practice, a nonprofit, or a local initiative. We'll dive into their real stories, the hustle, the setbacks, the small wins that make the big picture possible. Every guest will have something to teach us, because making it here isn't easy. Now, here's my conversation with the Epicenter NYC team. I think, Adriana, maybe we start with you, which is going to be a really basic question. How did you, who's a former accountant from Ecuador, a furniture shop owner on Northern Boulevard in Jackson Heights, a mother of two, how did you end up working for a journalism organization?
It's funny, I have always asked myself that question. The way I was able to get into this was through a critical moment, which was COVID. COVID was happening around the world, and I was answering to an email that was requesting people who could translate so that people that were trying to get vaccinated could get vaccinated, and I was more than happy to help. When I first arrived, that's all I thought I was going to do. But the area where we were, there were not that many people who needed translation. So I realized that the need was not really for a translator, but for someone who could help in many other ways. Whether this was just listening to their concerns, helping the nurses keep a line, anything that I was able to do, I was willing to do. I was there to help, and my mission was that.
Yeah, and I think that fits with kind of the start of Epicenter, which, launched as sharing and surfacing needs in the community. We started, with an email list, converted to an email newsletter. And then when the vaccine rollout, people like you, Adriana, became important ambassadors for our community. And at one point, we had more than 200 volunteers that were essentially carrying out this work around the city. And so this sort of dovetails to the formalizing of community engagement for us, right? So I'm going to turn it over to Danny. But Danny, your background is in community engagement. You actually studied this at CUNY Journalism School. I think it's worth kind of asking you the same origin story, and then we could pivot to the tremendous work that you've done for Epicenter and how you've kind of formalized a lot of our engagement with the community.
Yeah. So, I'm Danny LaPlaza. I'm Epicenter's manager for engagement, audience, and communities. And I understand community engagement as the core on which we understand how to help our neighbors, how to help our city, right? And that is through collaboration, cooperation, right? And my understanding of it is that news news is supposed to be information, but information doesn't always look like news, right? And how do we deliver that information and help to people is by understanding what their information needs are and working with them to fill those needs in the way that they access, their world, right? Whether it be a WhatsApp, whether it be flyers at a bus stop, whether it be conversations after a church, right? This is how people navigate their world. So I, joined Epicenter in October of 2021. And that was still, if folks can remember what New York was like, a few months after vaccinations, right? Many folks have been vaccinated at this point, but there is still a lot of work to be done to get vaccine coverage throughout the city. And specifically in the neighborhood that we're talking about is Queens Village, right? And so I think it was incredibly important in the way that we were there personally, right? We talk about meeting people where they are. And I think that's going to be a theme for our conversation today. And because it's a theme for Epicenter. We talk about that not from a metaphoric standpoint by meeting them with their languages or what they need, but sometimes physically, right? We were there outside of a church and by a park intentionally. And by us there, I'm referring to a van, a health and hospitals van that we had with registered nurses enabling people to be vaccinated on the spot. We lowered that friction and made it way more accessible for people to just say yes and also ask questions about these vaccines, which was Mitra, I know we talk about this often, is like there's a lot of vaccine skepticism, and at the time there's a lot of conversation about anti-vaccine, but what we found is a lot of that hesitancy just comes from access, right? So my own work in engagement journalism and the work at Epicenter is to increase access through information and also physical access to news and work.
One way to look at the appearance of a vaccine van in Queens Village, so just to sort of rewind on why we were there, Epicenter had been doing a lot of work around connecting folks to the vaccine. And Adriana was really responsible for saying, there's pharmacies, but they have weird hours. You have to register. You need a website link. And so our folks on the ground said, this is actually really hard. And then we approached the city and said, could you get a van out there? And they dispatched a van within a matter of a week or so. And I would say the old school journalism approach is probably to do a story saying, it's really hard to get vaccinated in this area, right? And then you sort of wait for, from a policy perspective, somebody to do something about it. And so we lose a lot of time in that process of both committing journalism, but then also the action against that journalism, right? And so I think there's a way that our community engagement has worked on behalf of communities. I can't think of anyone better to talk about operating on behalf of communities better than Carolina Valencia. So, your background in both journalism, nonprofit, and government service, is pretty unique. I just wonder if you want to talk a little bit about how you come to this work, how you're showing up, and some lessons learned.
I don't think there are any other organizations like Epicenter. Obviously, I'm biased, but I am speaking based on fact. The very point you just made about committing journalism, and then it's like waiting for a legislator or a nonprofit to come and solve the issue, right? Or a city agency to come and solve an issue. And I saw that, both through my work in media, at the New York Times and at Univision, and then in the nonprofit and in the city council, where, people are hungry for information. They want help. They also want to understand. They want guidance. And, part of what Danny shared about meeting people where they are is truly about understanding how are they consuming this information? How are they accessing this information? Who's giving them this information? And who are the trusted entities, right? And I think part of what makes Epicenter special is not just the staff, because we represent lived experiences. We live in these neighborhoods and we have the professional background, from like what we need to investigate to where do we get resources to make sure that we can bring that to people. And I think one of the things, seeing, especially at the height of COVID, we were living parallel lives because I was in the city council, just seeing like how much of an issue was, providing information in language, right? And understanding the cultural nuances that most people don't get around getting critical information to, neighbors that were desperate because they had to work or because they didn't have time or because they were concerned about their families. And the last thing I would say on this front is I think we all approach this from, we're not out there telling people what to do. We're here to have a conversation with you to understand what is concerning you. Maybe we're there because of a vaccine or because we want you to have the latest information about a new healthcare center or a mental health resource. And that's just a starting point. I think really proud that each of us in our different capacities have been able to have those conversations to get to the need of that person, right? And how do we connect them to that? Connecting them to, trusted sources, people that they already know, and really correcting disinformation and misinformation which continues to be very prevalent today.
Carolina, I don't want to take for granted that people will understand the economics of this. So how does that work? Obviously, Epicenter did not start out doing community engagement or this work around vaccines to make money. But as need grew, we started to file RFPs and field requests to better resource communities that needed it. So just before we kind of get to the most successful campaign I think that we've run over the last few months, just how does the money piece of this work?
I think it's a combination of for-profit partners, right? Like, private entities and also government entities. We saw during COVID how much the pandemic exacerbated, the inequity, especially with communities of color. And so being able to identify opportunities where we can continue serving these communities that always continue to be left behind around resources. So, being very aware and on top of what grants are available because this work is important and it's mission driven was a game changer because it allowed us to be in the communities at a deeper level and consistently week by week. And so, looking at what grants are available was important, and we were able to apply given the experience that Epicenter has and the staff has with some of this work. I think the other part of it too, right? The city government are always doing campaigns to make sure that their constituencies are aware of the resources and all the programs that they have available for their residents. And government's not creative agencies that like advertising agencies that have amazing campaigns. So this is where local media, local publishers are really important because we have that trust to be able to, get funding, to get critical information out. And maybe it sounds icky for others, but the way that I look at it, and I think you look at it and this team looks at it, is we just want to be able to fund the important work that we're doing to reach more people, right? Through in different languages, through creative flyering, through like really fun engagement. And you can't do that as a local publisher because resources are limited. But then you find the sweet spot where government is looking for partners to help execute important work that's going to bring resources to constituencies.
Yeah, I think that's really well put because in the news industry, we often frame areas that lack access to information as news deserts. And then in other industries, if they don't have grocery stores, it's a food desert. If they don't have transit, it's a transit desert. If they don't have vaccines, we use the term vaccine desert. And I think very quickly what we've discovered is that all of those issues are interconnected. And the information layer, i.e., solving the issues of a news desert, is really important to solving all of the other issues, but also that news alone cannot uplift a community. It has to do so in partnership with those other services.
And I would just say, add to that, like so much of what we're seeing in today's news is like, okay, so you're giving me the breaking news, the headlines, but what does that actually mean for me? And I think that's something that you have to do as a media organization, as a journal, in journalism, because you have to be able to kind of bridge the, okay, this is happening. So now what do I need to do about it? Or how do I address this? Because this is going to impact my life, right? And community engagement helps address that.
So I want to just spend the next few minutes talking about what I think has been one of our most successful engagements. It's called the BRAVE contract. It stands for Building Resiliency and Vaccine Equity. This is a public health initiative, and the intent was to reduce morbidity and mortality associated with respiratory infections, including COVID-19, flu, RSV, and a few others. Now, that's how we showed up in the community. Adriana, tell us a little bit about your experience with Brave, and then I might ask you a leading question about some of the other things people also asked you for help with.
So for Brave, I was on the ground most of the time just listening to people's needs. And what helped us be so successful in this program, I think, is the consistency that we had on the ground, because gaining trust not only for the people that we were serving, but also for the partnerships that we were able to create along the way was what made this such a strong place to be. And that consistency led to connection. We were able to connect with people, as Danny said, where they were. We didn't go to outreach and say, oh, this is what I am here and this is what I'm supposed to tell you. In a way, we listened to what they were going through. And when you truly listen to what they're going through, it always relate to health. So it wasn't easy to just say, oh, I'm here to do this. But it was very easy to listen and to relate everything that they were going through to the health issues. And that's exactly where I will put the information that we were out there to do. And by consistently being there, I had people that will come to me in every single way that they needed help. I was their translator. I was the person to help them file a form for immigration. I was the person that will provide a test. I was the person who will guide families that are struggling to get an IEP for their kids to go to school. And I was able to say, oh, Epicenter did this piece on IEPs. Maybe it will be useful to go. So this is where I connect journalism to the work that we're doing on the ground and have everything in just one place. So I feel that what we did was critical for many of the people that we encounter on the floor.
The things that Adriana mentioned that around being a connector and an understanding and just hearing people out had also a lot to do with how we were set up, right? We were very intentional about where we wanted to be. We wanted to be at libraries when they have their regular programming. Also being at, food pantries or something that happens every Saturday while people are waiting for the distribution to start. It allowed us to really talk to people one-on-one while they're waiting around, like, this is what, this is the latest that you should know around, this health information. And from there, Adriana would get questions about, computer classes, English language classes. Oh, I have a child that, needs an IEP. And like these conversations would come up because we would put ourselves in these settings to be able to really connect, not just one-on-one, but widely and regularly. And even like things like, fun family fairs, street festivals, being able to table along with others that are providing resources, even at what we had at our table, like we gamified our engagement, allowed us to really open that door to these conversations that, and everyone is always asking, like, those are good ideas. And, we're Epicenter. We're known in the community. We're not super famous, but the people that know us know that they can trust us for getting them the information they need. And we had the most engagement always in our settings because of not only the conversations we were having with them, but the way that we were opening that door for them to come and talk to us.
So you mentioned gamifying, which makes me turn to Danny. I understand that your bingo game just vastly improved in the course of this Brave contract.
Yeah, the most exciting bingo games I've played in the last year and a half, for sure. And that is with Elmcore Senior Center in East Elmhurst. So I'll start by saying this work was to get this critical health information out there, right? So from Carolina had the brilliant idea of creating a bingo card in which we replaced all the numbers with health related terms, right? And there were a few in there that were direct, like COVID and flu, but there was other ones that got into deeper conversations, right? Like the word sibling or daughter, right? For the idea that if your sibling or daughter were to be unwell, how would we take care of them? Have you had experiences like this? Or even words that seem surprising, like vacation, right? But the conversation is, well, we don't want these respiratory illnesses taking over our vacations, ruining our vacations, right? So there were ways into these conversations that, you know, I think everyone in the room understood how we were getting to them, right? But it helps to frame it in this game and in this way where we could walk around the room and we could point to words and we could have deeper discussions, right? Because then everyone is feeling the same way, which is excited to talk about these things, and also it's important. And I think another notable one that we would accompany with the bingo games is like skits, right? And I say skits in the way where we would have printed conversations, right? We would have scenarios, right? That we would have the one senior play the role as maybe grandmother, grandfather, friend, and we would also then play the conversation, the alternate role where we would talk about things like long COVID. Hey, there's a scenario in which I was coming to our weekly yoga class and I was feeling a little bit more tired, and then my partner in this case identified that they know someone that was actually experiencing the same thing, and it turned out to be long COVID. Again, like, it's sometimes a little on the nose, but I think that's okay because, we are all understanding that what's going on here, but the conversations are very real, right? The conversations then led to, well, how can I identify some of these symptoms, right? Who do I talk to, right? And we always made sure to let people know that their bodies are unique and they have to speak to their own primary healthcare provider, right? So, but I think the point that you're bringing up and we're talking about here is like, how do we start these conversations in an honest way, in an engaging way, right? In a way that people are familiar. The work that Adriana was just laying out, right? I think is like textbook journalism, right? It's identifying information needs, gathering that information, and then sharing it with folks so they can lead informed lives, right? But I think what journalists could learn from someone like Adriana is that she tapped into her lived experiences to emotionally connect with people to deliver that information and that trust, right? Adriana is a mother, is also to two young kids, is also a daughter to two elderly parents, right? That are from Ecuador, right? And so when they came to her, the first thing wasn't like, let me review this document with you. It was, I know how you're feeling. And that feeling is really tough. And we're going to do this together. And I think that trust will carries with you for years to come, right? And I think this is incredibly important in this kind of work.
For me, it was very easy to connect with people because I realized they're going through some of the things that never would even occur to me that it will be so needed for what I'm doing. As Danny said, I have two little kids and I have one that has an IEP program, and it was really, really difficult to go through. So when I connected with parents and I saw their pain, I felt their pain because I knew what it was. But I was at the other end. They were beginning, I was already ending, and I already knew what it was. So I just kind of guide them through and let them know that it is okay. It will be okay. It's not the end of the world like I thought it was going to be. And so it was the little things that truly make the difference.
With the time we have left, I think it is worth talking about the future of programs like this, right? The Senate has just passed a bill that curtails services like this quite significantly, including Medicaid. This Brave contract came to a conclusion. It's not being renewed. That's after years of federal funds that were supporting health equity in the manner that we're describing. And yet, I think, Adriana, what you're also painting is a picture of great need, right? That the resources have diminished, but the need is only increasing. And so I do feel like it's important to underscore the New York City that we're seeing and that we're experiencing and some of the challenges on the ground.
What we see, and I think what makes New York City great, right, is that because we are a city of immigrants, of different backgrounds, of all walks of life, when we see injustices, we really do come together for our neighbors, right? And even though like this Brave contract is ending, there won't be additional federal funding to help the program. And, we will be seeing more impact on the line for communities. I think this is where there's a real opportunity for the private sector to really show that they can help address inequities while we continue to fight and advocate for communities, at a government level. So I'm seeing, right, like there's a lot of sympathy and empathy and like, okay, what else can we do? How else do we continue showing up? How do we how do we connect the dots? And it's kind of what we've been doing, and many of our partners have been as well. But now there's even more urgency, and I would say even stronger unity, this shared purpose to like come out for New Yorkers, no matter where they're from.
Danny, I'm going to put you on the spot because it was astounding to look at the Brave numbers and realize we did reach 10,000 people through this program.
I think what's also concerning and unfortunate in these times is that those numbers, those vanity metrics, sometimes take precedent over the 10,000 real people, the physical people that we connected with, right? Rather than the digital views sometimes, right? And I think there's always a place for all of this work, right? I think it's important that we're using all of these platforms to the extent that we can, and that these platforms are working with us. I just want to go back to, again, with something Adriana just pointed out, right? She said she helped one person in person, and then by the next day, we already had other people expecting her at the library, right? And that kind of return of help is so validating for people in our position as a journalist, people working in this, right? That sometimes these digital platforms don't necessarily return to you, right? It's what reminds you as a journalist and as a social worker or anybody in these spaces, like, that you're connecting with real people. And unfortunately, in these digital spaces, you lose that, and they become certain numbers that are chased, right? Rather than trying to be understood, right?
I would also add that, I think the thing that drives us is meaningful engagement. Like these are meaningful hundreds and hundreds of hours of time that we put into creating these connections and this, loop, right? So I think something for, anyone that's partnering with us that has resources. I'm not talking about community partners. I'm talking about, the private sector, agencies, is to think about the impact versus the impressions, right? Like the impact that we can deliver because we're truly making these meaningful connections. We're truly delivering these resources, and we are reaching people, one person, one community at a time. And we do this not just in person, but, we make sure that we make this information available, through our videos and through our articles.
Adriana, I'm going to give you the last word because you are leaving us. Just any final thoughts, any final lessons? What are you taking with you?
I'm taking a lot of things with me. The most important one, I think it is that it doesn't matter what our backgrounds are. It doesn't matter where we come from. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. But if we have the opportunity to help someone, we have to do it. We have to ensure that the person who came to us is because they trust us, and we shouldn't take that trust for granted. I am very, very grateful for the opportunity that I had to work with this great team and Epicenter. And I hope that in the future, I get to do more work that is related to what I do. My background has always been accounting and finance, but there's nothing more exciting than being in the ground and touching people's lives and making a difference. I am sad to leave because I know that I leave behind elderly people that look for us. I feel it for them because technology is advancing at a very fast pace and they're not able to cope with that. And so they need people like us. They need someone that can tell them face to face, this is what you need. I will do it for you. I will teach you how to do it. We also need, humanity, like human interaction, to teach people that it is okay to learn all these beautiful programs that make you work faster and better. but not to lose that humanity that make us who we are, with our backgrounds, with our culture, with our languages, with everything that we come as a package to make a difference, right?
I do feel like as a journalist, I've learned so much from you about journalism, right? And that's not the background that you came to us with. So it's quite remarkable. Even if we're not funded, the worst thing we could do is not show up for our communities, right? It is the worst thing we can do, because we know from showing up that people hang on to harms that have been done from, hospitals that have closed or institutions that have let them down, or somebody said they would do something and they didn't do it. And we don't want to contribute to that harm, right? So to your point of people are out there waiting for us, it's our job to show up for them, right? That is the journalism that we practice. That is the model that we're built on. So thank you, all three of you, Adriana, Carolina, and Danny.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And if today's episode resonated with you, share it with a friend. We'd also love to hear from you. Leave us a review or reach out to us at hello@epicenter-nyc.com. That's all for today. Thanks for supporting us as we do our best to support our community. We couldn't do it without you. For more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at epicenter-nyc.com. While you're at it, click on the donate button.